And therefore, I want to take this opportunity to welcome one of us who's coming from Nigeria, and is going to speak about Nigeria as an export destination, and he will highlight the benefits of intra-Africa trade and AfCFTA. Lani Group sent us their CEO, Mr. Bassey, who was very instrumental in helping us to set ourselves in Nigeria. Bassey, please come and talk to us.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon, and greetings from Lagos. Today I'm going to be talking about Nigeria as an export destination. I'm going to highlight the benefits of the intra-African trade. Just as the last speaker spoke about, there is a lot of trade that we're not leveraging within the African continent or the African region. And one thing I want to say is that much as it's important to export to the US, to the EU, you might find that it's far easier to export within Africa because the market is similar, the psyche of the consumers are similar. It's some to a large extent, the branding, those sort of things that make the consumer and the product, the consumer product is something you probably already have. So I think you should try and listen and catch along as much as you can. Thank you. That's the content. I'm going to talk a bit about the past, the present, to set the scene for where we are heading to, or the reality of where we should be. So yesterday we talked a bit about where we had come from as Africa. And I think it's very important we know where we've come from in order for us to establish why we are here and in order to bridge the gap to the future. I don't think we should be thinking about trade just for trade, but trade for what? What is the end goal of trade? And many years ago, when I used to be an investment banker in the UK, we had the world famous Bassey-Eyo launch a book about debt aid that generated a lot of interest. And I think all Bassey was trying to say was that we don't really need aid in Africa. We just need to trade better. So I don't want us thinking here that we just want to get into a market in the US, Nigeria, Congo, but you should think about, why do I want to get into that market? That's what you should be thinking as exporters, at the company level, at the product level. So the past. Historically, when we look at trade in Africa, it was really driven by those that came in from the colonial, before the colonial, those that were looking for opportunity. And it's the same thing today. We're all looking for opportunity, and we need to understand that those fragmentations that we see today was created out of a problem that existed in the past. And therefore, those problems are things you can surmount. Just as my colleague spoke about DRC, there are opportunities there, but a lot of English-speaking exporters would be scared to go into that market just because of a language barrier. So it's important that we understand why the markets exist, the peculiarities of the market, and try to deconstruct them in creating an export strategy. I want to encourage you, don't just export. You must have an export strategy. You shouldn't just wake up here and say, oh, I'm extending macadamia nuts into the US. You must know why. You must see what you will get out of that over 3 to 4 to 5 to 6 years. So what we saw, slave trade, post-colonial trade, this created a lot of what we have seen in Africa. And I bring this into 4 because I believe this is where the Africa Free Trade comes in to truly solve this problem. So where we are now is that Africa has realized and woken up. Can we give ourselves a round of applause? It may have taken time, but we have actually woken up that there is an opportunity on ground. And there's an opportunity to leverage from what we have, north, south, east, west. We already have some sort of trading bloc, SADC, ECOWAS, the MENA region, and we should, and obviously the East African COMESA, is it COMESA? Yeah. We already have those trading blocks that have now set the scene for what I'd say is the sustainable Africa trade region. So when you're thinking about exporting, I think you need to start thinking about Africa in these blocks that are gradually winding and unwinding to become a Pan-African trading bloc. It will take time, but we're already there. We could see that AfCFTA has actually got a lot of ratification done. There's a lot of progress to be made in the next few weeks and months. But I think we have made a lot of progress between 2020 and now. And I think we really deserve to explore and build on the foundation of Africa free trade. And I think when we say that, I mean, that map there shows you what we have. We're a resource-rich continent. I mean, as a child, we used to travel a lot, and I remember going to Switzerland. Anyone here from Switzerland before I say something about Switzerland? I'm not saying anything negative. But when you go to Switzerland, Switzerland really is a country made up of rocks and mountains. But they have built something out of nothing. They make Switzerland an aspirational place to visit. Swiss chocolates, there's no cocoa or there's no chocolate that actually is, is born in Switzerland, if I may use that word. But, when we think about Swiss chocolates, you think about that's the highest point, the best chocolates ever. So we need to think about trade as not something that we're just selling. That some people have alluded to branding. Some people have alluded to creating brands. We need to own our brands. We need to own our resources, and we need to take it to the next level. You all know champagne. We drink champagne here. Nigeria is one of the highest drinkers of champagne outside France. True, but what is champagne? Champagne is basically white wine grown in the Champagne district of France. And by them owning that product, Prosecco, which is the same thing in Italy, does not enjoy the premium. Cava, which is the same thing out of Spain, doesn't enjoy that premium. So I think what I want you to start thinking here is not just exporting. You need to own products. You need to create that generic brand and patent it. That is only when you're going to reap the true value of products and trade. And the trade at the end of the day is sustainable trade to grow and lift us out of poverty. So what's the future? I believe the future is bright. One thing that we've not been shouting about here is the youth, and I want to focus on that a lot when I talk about Nigeria. The youth is part of the future of Africa. 65–70% of the population is youth-driven. So I want to ask my dear friend Odrek that we need to probably have a summit for youth exporters from Uganda, young youths, people 25 to 35 category, and start to build them. They are actually people who can surmount whatever obstacles that comes across them. Youth are very driven. They can build the creative overnight from nothing, and I think those are things we need to look at. Other highlights would be like the green economies, renewables. I know there's a lot of conversation about renewables in the sense that, carbon credit, carbon offset, it's not fair on us because we're not ones manufacturing. But I want to also encourage us that these are things we need to look at because there's funding, green funding available globally. So when we talk about Africa free trade, these are things that we need to start building pockets of youth, of digital, of green economies in Uganda. So that's the future, and I hope we start to plan for that future. So historically, in the past, we've seen that exports were agri-driven, agro-products. In the present, we're seeing that that is changing gradually. We're seeing a lot more around services, and we're going to see that more in the Africa of the future. We believe that the Africa free trade is projected to increase intra-Africa trade by 52%. And I think we also have a responsibility, starting even from this summit, to demonstrate that that model can work. I don't think it's a model that would just happen. It's a model that we would work, we would show, and like the panel alluded to, we learn from our mistakes, we learn from experiences, so that others don't make the same mistake. We need to share those mistakes, experiences, that we truly grow from them. So it's important to look at this data because I think it helps to position where we're going to. So what really is Nigeria perspective? I'm going to start from a personal perspective. I schooled in the United Kingdom. For my undergrad, my postgraduate, qualified as a chartered accountant, did tax law, worked in all the big firms. And there came a time when I felt there was something there was a niggling bit in me that, particularly when Nigeria was booming during the Bassey-Eyo regime, that, I had to go and add value back home. I must say something, no matter how successful you are abroad, there's always this thing about adding value to the community, and you feel sometimes that you don't really have the full platform to do that. Even if you're earning $6 million a year, you still feel there's something by being on ground and connecting. And that led me to move back to Nigeria in 2010, 10. So I've been back home now for 14 years. What's my perspective? It's tough terrain, but a terrain that has a lot of promise, a lot of arbitrage. That's why you still see the Lebanese, they don't leave the country. They come with 2 suitcases, in 3 years they build an empire. So it tells us that there is something in Nigeria, and there is a lot of Nigeria. There is a lot of promise, there's a lot of profit and arbitrage, but you need to know how to navigate the terrain. What are the general narratives? Just as my brother spoke about DRC, when you watch CNN, about Africa, the narrative is sometimes or oftentimes quite negative. And I think it's very important that you don't build your business plans on press narratives. You have a personal responsibility to investigate, do a field research, desk review, and also work with local partners. And I believe that's what PACBF is trying to do by working on appointing a trade rep in Nigeria and also have a trade hub, so that you'd have that first-hand knowledge of verticals, whether it's in fintech, whether it's HoReCa, and you're trying to export dairy products into the HoReCa sector, etc. Because yes, we're going through a tough time in Africa and the world at the moment, but there still is a lot of room for profits, and particularly for Ugandans also exporting maybe into the Nigerian market. So what are the realities? Having shared a bit of my personal perspective and some of the general narrative. The reality is that right now Nigeria is a bit of a hyperinflationary period. I'm not coming here to tell lies and paint things as all gloomy, all bright. There's a difficult part, and there's also a good side to every story. We must always have a full perspective so we make the right decisions. And a lot of that inflation is probably driven because we're importing a lot of fuel into the country, and fuel and foreign exchange brings in external inflation right into our domestic economy. That's one of the primary drivers of inflation. Nigeria is a country with a population of between 200 and 205 million people. And yes, there might be there would be poverty in some aspects, but the middle class remains very strong. And I mean, there's a lot of room for markets for you to export into. So having kind of shared that perspective about the reality, that I've shown you a slide here showing how inflation has gone up. Particularly in the last 1 year, we've seen a lot of inflation, and that has also been because the market has been largely deregulated. We are one of the largest producers of oil, but we are now, the government used to subsidize that. It's now the subsidies have been taken largely out of that product. So that has obviously spiraled cost, and it's also hit into the logistics, and that obviously has resulted, in the consumer RRP, retail price index you see in the supermarkets, etc. So you need to be aware of this when exporting into Nigeria, that you can bring in products that are competitive with what's obtainable in the market. But we are going to be walking out of this in the next 12 months. So in terms of a geographical perspective, Nigeria is big brother of Africa. Am I allowed to say that, guys? Are we Africa's big brother? We're not in South Africa now. I know that's the only country I'd say that there will be a bit of wahala. But we're all one. We're all one. I've enjoyed my stay here in Uganda so far, and I look to not just coming here, but also investing in Uganda. But to give you a perspective of Nigeria, Nigeria is a country made up of 36 states and the Federal Capital Territory. We probably have 5 international airports, which are all the size of Entebbe International. So I'm just kind of give you the size of markets you have here. We have, in addition to the 5 international airports, we have another roughly 20 other airports all around the country. So I just want you to understand that if you're exporting to Nigeria, it's not a small country. It's a country that, much as we say has infrastructural deficits, is a very structured and well-positioned economy. And therefore, from that map, you could see that you need to work with a local partner. It would be very dangerous for you to say, I'm just coming to Nigeria. For instance, when you look at that map, Lagos, which was a former capital, it's the commercial nerve center. As I explained to people, Lagos is like what New York is, and Abuja, capital, is Washington, D.C. That sort of gives you a perspective, like Sao Paulo and maybe Brasilia. So Lagos, that small city-state, houses 25 million people. 25 million people. So that alone is an economy. It's bigger than Kenya's economy, just Lagos. So you might say, I'm exporting to Nigeria, and maybe your focus is, I'm just going to be exporting into Lagos. Do you get me? And you're not trying to get products that you want to appoint distributors across the country, or you're working with your trade rep, and you just decide, I am just going to be in the Lagos market. Now, Lagos is also sometimes Nigeria, there's a bit of a divide. What we have, a rural and urban divide. The rural areas are very different, obviously, but we have in our urban centers very extremely wealthy upper class and highly aspirational middle class. So if you create products that are just servicing that market, you're home and dry, because you're probably talking about a population that is over 10 million. Do you get what I mean? A population, when you kind of ring fence that upper and aspirational middle class, that might be a market you're servicing. So it then starts to help you define what products should I be exporting to Nigeria. You don't necessarily need to export all your products. You might just decide, like I was flying on Ugandan, and I saw some, I think the hand lotions in the bath, in the washrooms is made locally. So you could do something like that, and it's high-end, and it goes into certain stores in Lekki and Abuja and that sort of thing. But you need to know who you're positioning your market. Secondly, unfortunately, you're aware we've had this, sorry, I need to go back. We've had this issue around insurgency in the country. So in the northeast, closer to where you have the Lake Chad, we've had insurgency for about 10 years. It's all under sort of control. But what that's done is that it's broken the supply chain. So these northeastern states of Yobe, Borno, Adamawa, the farmers have, in many instances, left their traditional homes and are now in IDP camps. So that has created what we say the shortage of food in Nigeria, where Nigerians used to produce for Nigeria. I hope you're getting where I'm going to. So this means that there are programs that you could be exporting grains into, maybe a UN program for IDPs, or a program you could be exporting grains into a World Food Program to serve the displaced persons. We have a probably IDP community of roughly 3 to 5 million, and that is a huge number. And these are where your, grains are being repackaged into smaller quantities and served into those communities. So I'm just trying to show you that it's a very wide market, and you could do all sorts of things. Now, on the other hand, where I see a lot of quick entry might be around services and servicing the hospitality sector. We have the largest number of hotel projects in Africa. We don't have enough hotels. We have a lot of hotel rooms, but we're launching new hotels every day in Lagos. So products that are coming into the HoReCa. HoReCa, for those of you who are not aware, HoReCa is hotel, restaurants, and catering. Whether it's portion butter, which I think there was Lato Farms. I tried your dairy product here in Monyo at breakfast, and it was good. I produce honey as well. Our company has honey. We don't have enough of that. Portion honey, portion butter, and things that, like the espresso you're showing me, those are things that can easily serve the hotel sector. And we're talking about the big chains, the Legends, the Marriotts, and our hotels are 100% full. You're coming to Nigeria. How many of you have been to Nigeria? We spend like crazy, unfortunately. So what I'm trying to tell you that you have products into the hotels. The hotels are usually at 90-95% occupancy, so they will buy your products. We actually distribute. We work with those hotel chains, the Hiltons, the Marriotts, etc. So that kind of gives you a picture of Nigeria. Now, in Lagos, typically, on the border, you have what you call Iseme, which adjoins the next country, which is Benin Republic, which is a francophone country. And interestingly, through the informal markets, Nigeria is a gateway to Anglophone and Francophone West Africa. So you may have your products with a good distributor in the informal segment of retail, and it's going to be going to as far as Burkina Faso, as far as Bamako in Mali. I just want to give you that perspective. Now, on the southern, to the south, which is where I come from towards the Cameroon border. Those are the oil-rich delta. I would say in Nigeria we have about probably 10 cities that have a minimum of 3 million people. 10 cities, apart from the bigger cities. So it's just to give you a market size. So ShopRite, which is one of the leading hypermarkets, there's about 26 ShopRite chains. We distribute into ShopRite. There's also Spar, which is probably another 27. We also distribute through them. And then we have regional retailers. Like in Southwest Nigeria, we have Foodco, which has about 80 retail stores right across Southwest Nigeria. I'm just trying to give you a picture that you can come in with either, I'm going to hit informal, which is the markets, or meet right into formal, which is the hypermarkets. So demographical perspective, gender distribution is roughly half and half. I think the women, they hold down retail in Nigeria, let's be honest. They're fashionable, the men are fashionable too, but our women, there's always a wedding, there's always, things around beauty. Just like if you've been to South Korea, you realize that the beauty segment is huge. Nigeria's beauty segment is very, very large. Heck, from hair to beauty products, we spend a lot of money on that. Youth-wise, we have 60%, and that shows that, particularly in the larger cities, Lagos, Abuja, Enugu, Ibadan, there's a lot of e-commerce, and the logistics delivery is fantastic. So you can go on Jumia, you can go on Konga, which is like Amazon, and you can order anything. So again, you may end up wanting to export to Nigeria, you may not want to export, you may just want to export and be on e-commerce sites, for instance, because maybe your scale is not that large, for instance, or you want to get market, it could be a penetration strategy to get your market. Religion also, we are kind of 50-50, Muslim, Christian. Most of the Muslims are up north, and the reason I share this is things like during Ramadan, we spend a lot of money around the honey and hampers and, fruits like dates. It's a big thing during those seasons. Informal market, honestly, the informal market is still very strong, but we're seeing a lot happening through the formal chains. And internet penetration is pretty high. Even though this is the national average, you'd find that it's high in places like in Lagos, and you'd find people buying rather than going to do physical shopping. So what does Nigeria import? We import all sorts of things, and that's because we have a large population. And that's also because our supply chain was broken. As I've given a sort of a history why it's been broken because of insurgency in the north, which has calmed down and cooled off. But also COVID created a big problem for us in terms of supply chain. And we're still grappling with being able to feed our population. So last month, we took off tariffs till December on grains. And we're importing grains from around the world because we do have a grain shortage. And that is something, some of you may want to think about or consider. We do import palm oil, which actually is it's one of the sad stories in Africa. In the 1960s, Malaysia came to pick some palm oil seedlings from where I come from, Cross River State. And now Malaysia has taken the palm oil industry to, a completely different level. We do import palm oil because palm oil is not enough. Most of our dishes have palm oil, and it's also used in in formal in industrialized processes. So there's wheat, raw sugar, malt extract, all these are things that we import. So what are the factors then that you need to consider if you are going to be an exporter to Nigeria? I think one of the fundamental things is think about the mode of transportation. I think myself and Odrek, we've had this back and forth for 3 or 4 years because when you think about it, first of all, a landlocked country, you need to get out to, is it Mombasa, preferably, or Dar es Salaam, and then go all the way around back to Nigeria. So you may want to, as an exporter, you don't need to think about everything coming to Lagos. You look at those things that we need. I was just having a conversation with a gentleman around fresh cut flowers. Again, it's a big thing we do import from Holland because we are big on events in Nigeria, and it's something that is part of us. So something like that, perishables will come in by air, and you need to look at the right carrier, etc. Secondly, it's obtainable in DRC, you must have the right local partner. And I say this because Nigeria is not a transactional country. We're a country of relationships. So I'll give you an example. Say you're exporting things into Nigeria, and you're exporting through me, and my daughter is getting married or my son is getting married. I expect it to be at the wedding. That's how we are. We're a relationship. And that's what builds this thing. So you need to understand that it's not just a market. You come, drop your goods, and you don't get involved. You must be involved. So have the right partner that you can engage, do your due diligence, and vice versa. Regulatory considerations from customs tariffs, etc. Honestly speaking, if you have the right partner, this becomes less of your headache. Pay for it and let it be done, whether it's clearing forwarding. Your focus, I think, should be making sure that when when an order is given, that order in March, if you're going to do 10 containers in March, I'm just using a wild example, that you can continue to sustain that order. People don't want you to be on the shelf for 6 months and then you no longer can be on the shelf, because once you get off shelf space, it's difficult to get shelf space. I mean, we use relationships to make this happen. But once you get off your shelf space, within 2-3 weeks, your competitor will take over and it'll be difficult to get back on that shelf space. In fact, I'll give you a story. It's because of our FX rate back in 2015 that you started seeing a lot of the hypermarkets allow made in Nigeria goods come in. Before, it was just the foreign goods they'd have on the shelf spaces. But when that FX rate created a big issue, they realized that they needed to look for competent and good Nigerian products. And that's when, like, the products that come out of our factories, some of them started getting shelf space back in 2014, 2015. Now, but don't take that for granted, because where products from France get off the shelf, Turkish products are struggling to take over almost immediately because of price competitiveness. So you need to note that. Then the fourth thing I think is low-hanging fruits. When I had conversations with Bassey-Eyo, I think I was on the UNDP call with a few months ago, I'm hearing a lot about products. And I felt that one of your low-hanging fruits is tourism. You know, it's my first time in Uganda. I come to East Africa a lot, but this is my first time in Uganda. And I was wondering, my goodness, Uganda actually has not marketed themselves for the world. I don't know, maybe you attract people from Europe, but you know, with all due respect to my European colleagues, they just want Africa. But for someone who's coming from West Africa, we want comfort. We're not going to come and sleep somewhere that is uncomfortable. We want that same. No, I'm just telling you how Nigerians are, so you know. So when you look for a Nigerian, they want a spa, they want a lodge that has a spa and there's air conditioning, there's no mosquito. I'm being honest. They're not coming to, because we always say that I can never leave my home to go and sleep somewhere less comfortable than my home. That's how West Africans think. So in terms of tourism services, you know, if you have a Nigerian client, please start pampering him from the airports. I'm just being real. That's the way you hold him down. As he's coming out, all the bling, give it to them. That's what we want. When we come, whether it's for business tourism or to let go, we want comfort. Everybody from my country is running to Zanzibar. I mean, I was in Diani Beach on a conference, and because we have a training side of our businesses as well, we took a large number of government officials to Diani. We go to Malindi. They're in Rwanda, Kigali, on a continuous basis. But this convention center is as good as what Kigali has, even better. So that, to me, is a low-hanging fruit. I think at the end of this conference, we should be talking to the tour operators that can help work with us to curate good experience into inbound tourism. And you've got an airline flying directly. There's no reason why you shouldn't explore that. And by the way, I was very impressed with the service on Ugandan Airlines. Very, very good. Keep it up. The last thing I didn't hit there was knowledge management. So knowledge management and continuous training. Don't think you know it all. You need to know and own that market you want to export to. And Nigeria is one of those markets. We come across sometimes as aggressive and arrogant. And it's not that we are aggressive and arrogant. We actually are not. But sometimes we just want to get that thing done. You know, Audrey, how many times was I disturbing you on dairy? Continuous, right? So people might think it's aggressive, but it's that when we have a mandate, we want to close that mandate. We don't leave mandates hanging around. So don't misinterpret that. Understand. I think one of the things to do is if you are exporting or you are, whether it's good or services, try and have that conversation and let it not be a one-off conversation. Don't assume because I've sat here and I've spoken to you that will remain my need for the next 6 months. No. Maybe next month, I might be talking about a presidential retreat and they suddenly feel, oh, where can we go to? So if you're not in my face, I will not remember. Do you get me? So you must build that relationship, that knowledge, and you must continuously train and know the market. So something else which I touched on is Nigeria is the gateway to West Africa. So if you want your goods to be all the way to Sierra Leone, Ghana, Liberia, Nigeria is your market. You know why? Everyone from those countries, they come to Lagos to buy. Did you know that? Did you know that? They come weekly to buy. In fact, we used to have, back in the days, these women that are traveling back on the West Coast, they would wrap bales of material around because they don't want to pay extra tariff and have so many clothes and suitcases on them. So I want you to know that once your product is seen, it goes across the entire market. And forget the fact that we have Francophone, Anglophone divide. The market of Lagos, they are coming to buy from Benin and from Togo. So think about that. So because my conversation here wasn't just about Nigeria. It also was about Africa free trade. And what does that really mean? And I think I started touching on that when I spoke. Number one is import substitution. I think this is really where you should start thinking. Sometimes we want that the first product we're exporting is a product we've not tried. Your untried products. is you're trying to get into a market. Like the Tuki would not sell in Nigeria because we're not that health driven. It's a US market thing. You need to know that. But what is going to sell in Nigeria is the butter, the portion butters that are coming from Turkey. Can I replace it with a Ugandan brand almost immediately? And can you promise me that when Hilton calls my head of sales, you will not tell me that you cannot do those? Because Hilton Abuja has 1,000 rooms and is fully booked every single day of the year. So import substitution, and African countries start to produce the goods that you can sell into one another, that the country you're exporting to is probably importing from elsewhere. The other thing that Africa Free Trade will do for it is hedging our foreign exchange. I'm a corporate treasurer by training and background, and honestly, we're in a period of volatility. I mean, I'll tell you about Nigeria. The exchange rate has gone to the dollar has gone from 400 in May last year to 1,700. My son just graduated from University of Nottingham in the summer, and I was like, hallelujah, thank God, because that's just one FX exposure of me. And if I'm thinking like that, the micro household level, this is how companies are thinking, and this is how you should all start thinking, and these are the people that you are exporting to think. We want to reduce what is foreign exchange on my books that I can get rid of. In our company at the moment, one of the things we started getting rid of is ICT. Where we're paying subscription in dollars, we're looking at local companies that can provide us the same ERP services instead of us paying it to a company in the US and we're paying FX. So I want to start looking at problems. Trade should solve problems. Trade is not just, I want to now be said I'm a Ugandan exporter. No, you should be solving my problem in Nigeria. And so you might be a fintech company here, or it might be some young guys who can create an ERP system and can come into Lagos and within a year can sign up 1,000 SMEs and they're providing fintech. Are you not still exporting? Is that not export? Please, is that not export? So we need to deconstruct export mythology in our mindset. The other thing we need to realize is that Africa Free Trade will increase income in the local economy. When I'm talking about local economy, I'm not talking about Kampala, Nairobi, Lagos, Abuja. I'm talking about the smallholder farms. One thing about me, I'm not a fancy businessman. I go to the grassroots, I get into the farms. I have a food business, I get right into those farms, and sometimes they offer me food, I'm like, oh my God, can I actually eat this food here? But that's how real I am. And what I'm trying to say is that until we build those local farmers, we have not and will not celebrate progress. Progress should be a common prosperity and a shared prosperity. And that is what trade within Africa must and should do. And as we're increasing those incomes, we must build competitive skills in the local economy. So for you that are exporters, you need to start thinking maybe with PACBF, with UNDP, you need to start looking at, can I build out grower schemes? Can I become an aggregator? You don't have to do it, and there's a value chain to export. You don't have to be the one doing production, the labeling. These things can, and I think that's how you need to think about when you're exporting into Nigeria, when you're exporting to other countries. Next, we need to understand that there's a value chain. So by now, I'll probably need dairy. I need fresh flowers. Probably not fresh flowers, I don't need huge quantities, but I need dairy products. We don't have enough milk in Nigeria. And the milk that comes in, unfortunately, from other countries, I won't mention the name, it's powder milk that they bring in and then they mix it back. That's not milk. Is that milk? That's not milk. So that is a huge market, dairy. Portion butters, butter, it's a huge market because South Africa is 56 million, we're 200 million. So in terms of the value chain, I want to know, does Uganda fly into Lagos empty just with maybe 100 passengers? What is in the cargo hold? You can put fresh flowers, you can put, that's what we want to see, so that you're maximizing. And for Ugandan Airlines, if you're here, don't look at it as in I need to make so much money out of that transaction. Break even at the start, maybe a little bit of a margin, because that way you're able to exit products out of Uganda. So that value chain, transport, logistics, and it's better it's your national carrier. Let's not lose it to Rwandan or to KQ or ET. Make your carrier to work, particularly into the key markets in Africa. And again, on local levels, transportation and logistics will grow because we'll get to a point where I can probably sit on Amazon in Lagos and order something, and that whole supply chain will build local businesses. Then lastly, which is a very, very interesting point, and I'm happy you've already started looking at it here today. I was speaking to the guy from, was it Alan from UG? The financial markets must deepen. For you to facilitate trade, we need to move away from those days that you want to do trade and then you're running to Paris to sign an LC. That's crazy. That's madness. Sorry, I'm not using the wrong words here, but we need to change. We need to get to a point where we are transacting with our local currencies. And we can be innovative about that. Like when we had a clamp on FX in Nigeria, what we found entrepreneurs who are buying lots of ICT hardware from China, they moved to crypto and it worked. So let's be innovative. You can be innovative, you can be challenging. I think we need to disrupt, and that's what Africa Free Trade will do. So those financial markets, whether it's a commodity exchange, as we were talking yesterday about commodities, I quickly hit the guy in Abuja who's a friend of mine, African Commodities Exchange, and they said they're here in Uganda, but it's a small team. We need to have those more commodity exchange. We need to see blockchain. We need to see a deepening of fintech, the financial market, and trade mechanisms. And we also need to be open as government and as the private sector. I want us to challenge government because it's a public-private partnership. That's really what SDG promotes. The government doesn't know it all, private sector doesn't know it all, but together we can really make trade work. So food for thought. I'm thinking that in you exporting to Nigeria, it's not just about you exporting. Perhaps your export to Nigeria could even be a strategy for inward FDI into Uganda from Nigeria. We've seen the Nigerian banks that have opened in Kenya, right? Across the continent. We can have others through, okay, let me give you an example. You have electricity here 24 hours, right? You have 24 hours electricity. Am I correct? So in Nigeria, we struggle with energy. We have an energy crisis. In South Africa, there's an energy crisis. Do you not think that as you start exporting, I could think, oh my God, maybe we should invest in Uganda. Can I buy land and open a factory and out of that, maybe even export into the Middle East? So I want us to start looking that Africa Free Trade changes the conversation about exporter and importer. It makes trade realistic, it makes trade sustainable, and it builds our local economies. So, question and answers. There's a scan there for you. If you're intending to export into Nigeria, you could fill out a form there that goes directly to the back end, your sector, what your interest is, etc. But are there any questions that you may have? I could probably take one or two questions. I wanted this to be a bit more practical, and excuse me if I'm actually speaking from the heart, because I think Africa's renaissance is right here, is in our hands. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Questions? I think there's no question, right? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Annie. There's a question from somebody there.
Were you testing to see how fast I run off the stage before you ask your question?
Yeah, thank you so much, Matt, for this opportunity. My name is Stephen Bassey-Eyo. I'm from Farm Uganda. We produce high quality cassava flour. At Farm Uganda, we decided that we shall shout, we shall make a noise, and if it means fighting, until we see the first container of high quality cassava flour exported. My question, you may correct me if I'm wrong. I understand Nigeria is one of the largest producers of cassava. My questions that don't go beyond the cassava. But again, I also read somewhere that you import cassava from countries like Thailand, Vietnam, and Brazil. You mentioned that you have some countries that come to buy some products in Abuja. What could be the driving factors for this? You're the biggest producer of cassava, but again, you import. And what opportunities do exist for an SME like Farm Uganda to tap into these opportunities? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. This question is not just peculiar to the cassava value chain. It goes even back to crude. We're one of the largest exporters of crude, but unfortunately we import refined crude into the country. So I'm going to limit my answer to cassava. Cassava in Nigeria, the species of cassava we have, has a high moisture. So from the point of harvest to the point of processing, it's a very short lead time. If you miss that lead time, it actually releases something dangerous, and it's not food gradable. So we tend to have most farms produce and process into gari. Gari is like your matoke, right? So we are not doing a lot of high value additions to cassava as we should, because it's a staple food. However, during the Jonathan's era, that's President 3 terms ago, we looked at the possibility of cassava flour, and it's been launched and well received. It's something, you've heard of IITA, it's a research institute, it's based out in Ibadan. They do what we have cassava bread. It's 95% cassava flour and 45 with a few other minerals. So it does work, but it's the issue of cassava is because we use it for gari, we have also have to import. Now, lastly, one other thing I want to say about cassava is that we've also had a need of recent that people are exporting it for ethanol. There's been that debacle, and this is where sometimes in your export you need to be very careful that you export what you overproduce, so that you don't export that you create a longer time problem in terms of food security. I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Any other question?
Hello.
Do you have a mic?
Good afternoon to you all.
Oh, sorry. Apologies.
I'm called Lucia Namubiru. And I have a company called Luna's Enterprises Uganda Limited. We are manufacturers of sweaters like this one I'm putting on, plus school sweaters. I'm the best knit of sweaters in East Africa. Apart from that, I'm the president of OIT Uganda chapter. OIT is an organization for collecting women who want to export their products to other countries. So from there, you have talked about AfCFTA. I would like, maybe you can convey our message. Last time we were in Cairo, when we want to trade with African countries, we have some challenges. Where the challenges come from, we went there, I took 10 companies of the women, but after selling their products, the exchange rate for the dollar increased, and even the dollars were not there. We also went to Burundi for East African Jua Kali. Even when the people see that you have sold your products, they raise the dollar rate. Even the people I took to Egypt, they tried to buy, using that money for Egypt, to buy their products, to bring products, instead of bringing their what? Their capital, their money back to Uganda. How can they work on that challenge? And another thing, I don't know whether you can also convey that message. We went for Cairo exhibition, but I think we worked only 4 days. Other days, there were some other what? So people, they lose their money, they have put in money to come for the exhibition. So how can we trade with African countries? But the exchange rate doesn't affect our businesses. Because if I go to UK, I come with my pound, I just change it, but there you change to dollars, and then you change to Uganda money. Sometimes we make losses. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your comment. And I think it's something that, my slide spoke about deepening the financial markets. And we need to teach exporters that in dealing cross-border, you expose yourself to foreign exchange risk. It's just standard. But because those who export in large volume, they're able to suck in that risk more than you. So if I'm only making 50 sweaters, compared to someone who's making 1,000 sweaters, you will end up having that risk. So I think one of the things you could do is, I saw your sweater yesterday and I said it was nice. Unfortunately, we won't buy sweaters in Nigeria. It's already 37 degrees. And it's only a few places in the mountainous region. But do you know what I think could work? You could have a cooperative. I don't know if you're already set up as a cooperative. You could brand it as a women's group. You need to reach that premium market, organic, fair trade. You create aspirational stories. When people show you scarves made out of Peru, they create stories around it. So you need to have a brand affinity. And I'm telling you, with that, you can get into stores in London that are even not the high-end physical stores, but the high-end e-commerce stores, and they will buy it. They'll buy your sweaters once they know it's made from a village in Uganda by Lake Victoria, and that women work there with, some story around it. You could sell that sweater for £350 without batting an eyelid. Am I wrong? It's all about marketing. And I think that's really where artisanal and a small-scale producers and exporters need to be encouraged. Artisanal is not a bad thing. There are people that all they do a year is produce 1,000 copies of something, but 1,000 copies are maybe €3,000 per piece. And maybe that's a segment you need to brand, and you need to own that segment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Annie Bassey.